All right, let's get right into it. Conor McGregor, Max Holloway. This fight is happening Saturday, July 11th. At the time of me recording it, it is Wednesday. So we're a few days out, and as you can tell by the title of this video, I have a prediction as to who I think is going to win, and I think that's going to be Max Holloway. But before I get into it, let me explain a little bit about who I am and why my opinion even matters here, because that's all it is it's my opinion. I'm Dylan Nadler. I'm the founder of MindLock, and I work as a mental performance coach to high-performance athletes across the world, including a lot of the top MMA fighters across all combat sports organizations, including the UFC. And this is my take based solely off of psychology and psychological principles as they relate to fighting and combat and nothing else. So I'm not going to be talking about how they match up stylistically. I'm not going to be talking about anything like that in terms of the actual physical game plan that both athletes are bringing into this fight. I'm going to be talking about the mindset. I'm talking about the psychology behind performance and success and how we measure up Max Holloway and Conor McGregor here. So that's a bit of a background. And ultimately what I'll say is, like, I like both fighters. I think Conor McGregor is great. I think he's great for the sport. I think he's great for the UFC. I'm a big Max Holloway fan as well. So it's not necessarily grounded in even who I want to win, but it's who I think I will win, or who I think that will win this fight. And I'll explain into it. And really it just comes down to one thing, which is how an athlete chooses to define success, and not just at the surface level, but beneath the surface subconsciously when it comes to the definition of success and the subconscious definition of success. I think I'm not crazy in saying that for Conor McGregor, the fact that he is even getting back into a UFC octagon is a massive win and a massive accomplishment. Me personally, I just didn't think that we would see Conor McGregor back in the octagon at all. And I can imagine that there were parts of him at certain points where maybe he agreed. He was coming off of injury, personal stuff, everything that was going on. For him to make that walk back into this ring on Saturday night, that is a win. Now, I think that might come to the detriment of his performance, because when part of winning is just showing up, that box gets checked, it's going to be very hard to maintain that same intensity and consistency in the depths of this fight, which can be very brutal and gruesome. I think for Max, showing up to the ring and walking into that octagon is not a measure of success. I think it's the bare minimum, it's the requirement. No, of course I'm walking into the ring. Max's job in his mind is to go out there and deliver the best performance he's capable of and show the world how much he has developed since his last fight. Who he is now as a fighter is a much more mature and experienced fighter, and I think we've seen that version of Max over his last couple of fights, of who he's really becoming and stepping into his own. This to me is the first kind of big gap in the big divide, where for Conor, making that walk into the octagon on Saturday night is a part of the win for him, versus for Max, making the walk is just the bare minimum, it's a requirement, and the win for Max is going out there and delivering the best performance possible. This is what leads me to believe that Max Holloway is going to win this fight, because of the subconscious definitions of success and how we choose to define them. Now, where does this come from, right? Where does the subconscious definition of success come from? It comes from what we call a reference point. Now, a reference point is just what you choose to compare a situation against, because if we have no comparison, how do we know if something's good or bad, right? If I say to you, it's 15 degrees outside, Celsius, in Fahrenheit, I think it's 59, 60 degrees. If I say it's 15 degrees outside, is that a nice day or not? Well, my first question would be, compared to what, right? Is it the winter time? If it's January, and I'm here in Toronto, if it's January in Toronto and it's 15 degrees Celsius, that is beautiful. But right now it's July. So if it's 15 degrees in July, not so great. You're like, what's going on? Why is it so cold? So the temperature didn't change, but what we're comparing it against allows us to recognize if something's good or bad, right? So when we walk into the ring, when Conor makes that walk, what is he comparing this moment to? Coming off of injury, all of these personal things that he's been going through, and just the journey back into the octagon, because of how challenging that's been, and that is his reference point. Making that walk in is what makes me believe, not that he said this anywhere, it's really just my best guess, I have no inside information. It leads me to believe that subconsciously that becomes a measure of success because of the reference point that we compare against. Versus for Max, the reference point is just previous fights that he's had, fights he's done well in, fights he hasn't done so well in. He's able to measure against that to say, oh, well, I've recently competed and at a pretty high level. Let me go out there and do it again and do it better. So they have very different reference points that they can compare against when it comes to Max and Conor. And I think Max's reference point is not just competing, but now he wants to obviously compete to win and to dominate. Versus for Conor, his reference point is coming back from injury, a lot of personal stuff that's been going on, the long road back into the octagon, which can create this kind of mental checkpoint to say, well, I've passed the checkpoint, I've made it to this point. Okay, the rest is just, it is what it is, but I've made kind of the big deal happen, which sometimes we can confuse. Now, what's another example of this, right? Kind of prematurely checking off a checkpoint before the main event is making weight. So you'll notice this a lot of the time with athletes who cut a lot of weight. And if you've cut weight, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't, it's kind of hard to explain. But sometimes the weight cut in and of itself is the war. The weight cut becomes, in our mind, the main event long before the fight does. And there's a sense of stepping off the scale and thinking, wow, okay, I made weight, I did my thing. And you almost, not forget, but it doesn't come into light or into focus the fact that ultimately the job is to perform the next day. Who cares if you make weight? This is not a weight loss competition. Making weight as a fighter is just your ticket to the fight. And once you recognize that the weigh-in is just your ticket to the fight, we're able to reestablish our priorities, right? If you put the weigh-in on a pedestal because it's so tough and challenging and that's the war, sometimes we have too much of a release when the weigh-in is done and we forget to kind of re-engage that intensity prior to the fight. So sometimes if you cut a lot of weight, you know what I'm talking about, the weight cut becomes kind of the main event. It's hard to re-engage and refocus for the fight itself because we feel like we've had that big release first. So when it comes to Max versus Conor, my assumption, my guess, if I had to guess, is that the ability to make that walk back into the ring for Conor is going to be a win. It's going to check off a subconscious box in his head. And I really emphasize subconscious because I guarantee both athletes want to win. Both athletes want to deliver amazing performances. And both athletes, of course, want to have their hand raised in the most dominant fashion. It's the subconscious. It's the stuff behind the scenes. I think that Max, again, to reiterate one more time, knows that making the walk into that ring on Saturday is just the prerequisite that is required to deliver his performance, versus for Conor, making that walk in and of itself is a win. And this is the idea that leads me to believe that Max Holloway is going to win this fight on Saturday from a mental point of view, nothing to do with technique, nothing to do with matchup stylistically, but from a psychology background and a psychology point of view. This is what leads me to believe that Max Holloway is going to win this fight on Saturday because of the subconscious definition of success, the energy that is being brought in, the level of engagement, and the consistency from start to finish. As the rounds go on and the fight gets tougher and tougher and tougher, who's willing to stand in there and fight for what they want? And I think it's going to be Max. But at the end of the day, I could be right, I could be wrong. I think this is just for fun. And honestly, why I'm even making this video is because I think it's so easy these days to ride the fence and play the politics and not want to make a choice because of the fear of being wrong. I mean, who cares? If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If I'm right, I'm right. I think it's just fun to pick a side sometimes. It's fun to take some knowledge that you know and apply it in a very specific way. And again, the psychology background that I'm bringing into this is just one piece of a much, much larger puzzle. So, this does not account for the entirety of the camp or anything like that, but it's my take. And if there was something that you were able to kind of learn from this, or a skill or a perspective that you think could be helpful for yourself, then great. But I don't know, this is what I love to do, is what I'm passionate about. And if I have a chance to kind of make a call or make a prediction, why not? It's fun at the end of the day, but we'll really have to see what happens on Saturday night.